All right, the name is Joshua Francis, and you're welcome to the Think Podcast. So I want to share a very simple idea, and this idea was promulgated by Adam Smith. I was reading his book, The Wealth of Nations, and the idea actually struck me. It was kind of interesting, really interesting. I could not resist it. I have to share it with someone. And here it is. The idea is actually in 2 dimensions, 2 levels. Let's hear this. He says, the labor of every nation is the fund which supplies it with all the necessaries and conveniences of life. Now, I know this is talking about nation, and Adam also, his context of sharing this idea was on the notion of nations, but yeah, I think he can actually relate it to anything else. And where I'm going with this is relating it with the individual. So I'm going to change it a little bit. So hear how it sounds now. It says the labor of every individual is the fund that supplies it with all the necessaries and conveniences of life. If we could change it to the family, to a small group, we could say the labor of every family is the fund that supplies it, which is the family, with all the necessaries and conveniences of life. And it struck me as a kind of really brilliant idea. Even now, it still sounds really brilliant. Let me give an example to explain this idea and see where we can move on from there. The story of the farmer. He puts in labor and produces, let's say, for example, rice. He provides for his family with the result of his produce, which is rice. But since his family needs other levels of provisions, the family doesn't just need rice for food, they also need books. Some family, remember we're talking about necessaries and conveniences. So some family might need a television, some family might need a torchlight, some family will need chairs, couch, seats, phone, mattresses, and things like that. So he has to provide the need, other levels of provisions for you that his family might need. So in order to do that, he exchanges his produce, which is rice, with anyone who needs the rice, but for something they have of which he has need of. That's a very brilliant idea when you think about it. Really brilliant idea. So let's look at another example. And let's talk about the engineer. The engineer, for example, might have an idea about farming, or probably, he might have an idea, but usually he doesn't have the luxury of time to go into farming. Might be doing it as a hustle, side, something more like a passive job, but it's not his profession. It's not what he does. It's not his labor. His labor is engineering. He puts in labor in the engineering field. The farming is not his business, so he doesn't really have time to do that. But someone else is willing to put in labor to those activities of which the engineer does not have time or passion for. So with the produce of the engineer's labor, be it a house or a car, machinery, or maybe even work materials that the farmer might, have need of, the farmer can exchange his bountiful harvest, which the engineer has need of, for the produce of the engineer, which the farmer, has need of, which is a very brilliant idea. The engineer makes cars. As a result of, that's the produce of the labor of the engineer. It's a car. But the produce of the labor of a farmer is not a car. It's actually, food and things like that. The engineer doesn't have time for the produce to put in labor that the farmer puts in. The farmer doesn't have time, nor probably the expertise, to put in the kind of labor that the engineer puts in. So we find ourselves in this place. And in order for these people to satisfy each other's needs, they have to be an exchange. So the 2 levels of human sustenance as regarding the result of human labor Adams was trying to share are in these facts. The first one is the laborer gets sustained first by his own produce. For example, the farmer he produces rice, out of his labor. Rice is his produce for the labor that he puts in. And his family could also be sustained by that rice. He doesn't necessarily, if probably the produce of his labor, he doesn't have need of it, he can exchange it. But if he has need of it, he can be sustained by it itself. That's what the first idea is talking about. That the laborer gets sustained first by his own produce. And then the second idea says the laborer gets sustained with what produce of other laborers his own produce can purchase, which is a brilliant idea when you think about it. The farmer, for example, probably the produce of his labor, he doesn't have need of it. The farmer doesn't eat corn. Neither does his family eat corn. They don't like it. So, but someone else, another farmer, for example, produces rice and his family likes rice, or beans and his family like beans. They can exchange. That's what this idea is talking about. The laborer gets sustained with what produce of other laborers his own produce can purchase. So it's possible that his corn can purchase for the other farmers beans, then we have a win-win. And that's the idea that Adam was trying to share, which is a very brilliant idea when it came to me. So let's step a little bit forward to think about it this way. If, for example, you want to increase the amount of produce of the other person that you would want your own produce to exchange for, that means your own produce has to increase in value, so much so that it can, purchase a large amount of the other person's produce. And how do you get your own produce to increase in value? Which means that, for example, my personal opinion is that your own produce, as a result of the labor you put in, has to increase in quantity, or it has to increase in quality. That's a very simple idea when you think about it. If your produce of the labor you put in has to increase in quantity or quality, that means the labor you put in, garbage in, garbage out, has to increase also. But what dimension of increase that labor has to increase in? It's called dexterity. It's called skill. And those things take time, they take practice. So in order for you to increase the quality or the quantity of your produce, that means the labor has to increase. There has to be an increase in dexterity of labor. The increase in dexterity of labor of an individual, of a society, of a nation, will increase the quality and quantity of the produce that their labor gets them. And at that point, the level at which they are sustained gets increased, because they could also consume from the produce of their own labor. And also, they could also exchange for more or for better produce of other people that their own produce can purchase, which is a very nice idea when you think about it. Someone says, I make 200,000 naira a month. How is it possible for me to make 2 million naira a month? It's based on the same idea. The dexterity of the labor that you put in, people have to perceive the value. They have to smell it. When you come in and say, oh, he's around. The big man is around. The big lady is around. They really have to perceive that dexterity. They have to sense the value that they're having. So I think it's a very great idea to share. So tell me what you think. Give me the comments, subscribe, follow, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.